Happy Wednesday. Thanks for joining us today. Can you guys hear us okay?
Hey, Mark. Can you hear us okay?
Awesome.
Yes. Okay, great.
Great.
Awesome.
Yay. Okay. Good.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
Let's do it.
And then let me just switch over to the screen here.
Well, let me
go ahead.
quickly share. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through a presentation. We're going to teach, and then we're going to talk to you guys about accelerating wealth and the bonus. And then finally, we're going to answer some Q&As. And so for those of you who have Q&As while we're talking, please put it into the Q&A section, which is different from the chat. So the chat is great for you to talk with each other and communicate with our staff member who's here. And I don't know who it is off the top of my head.
It's Kirsten today.
It's Kirsten.
Yeah.
And then the Q&A section is where you should put the questions you have that you want us to get to after we're done with our presentation.
Okay, Tyler and Jessica. All right, let's get started here. So, Kirsten, can you allow screen sharing? Thank you. All right, this is good because more people are joining. All right, perfect. Thank you. Okay, can everyone see the presentation? It should say 100 hours and 100K. Yeah, everyone can see that?
Awesome.
Yes. Okay, great. All
okay.
right. Okay. Just 1 second here. Okay, perfect. Okay.
Okay, so today we're going to be talking to you guys about 100 hours and 100K and how to use short-term rentals to transform your finances in just 1 year. One of the questions a lot of you are probably out there asking is, why are every doctor I know buying short-term rentals? Because we know this is a trend that's been going on. And so some of you are probably wondering, why is it everyone's so into short-term rentals? And what we're going to be showing you in this masterclass is how to use short-term rentals to transform your finances in just 1 year and why everyone is so crazy about short-term rentals.
All right, so here's what you'll learn, and this is what we're going to cover. So the first thing is how one short-term rental can generate life-changing cash flow. So for some of you guys, maybe you're investing in long-term rentals and you know that the cash flow can be 5,000-10,000 a year, maybe a little bit lower. Well, with short-term rentals, one short-term rental can be way past that, much more than that. We'll also talk about 2 ways to use short-term rentals to save on taxes without cutting back at your day job. So very different than real estate professional status. The top 3 mistakes that short-term rental owners make, and we're going to show you how you can avoid them. And finally, how you can instantly boost the value of your short-term rental. And so what we're talking about here is appreciating your short-term rental in a way where you're not just gambling and hoping that it's going to appreciate, you're actually forcing that appreciation to happen. All right.
So a little bit about who we are. So I'm Leti, this is Kenji. We are hospitalists and we achieve financial freedom in 3 years by investing in rental properties, cash flowing rentals. We currently own over 150 units, and these are long-term rentals and short-term rentals, and they're in multiple states. And then we also are general partners. So like we run syndications for an additional 424 units.
And for us, what we do at Semi-Retired MD is really our passion project. We're really on a mission to help our fellow doctors and other high-income professionals achieve financial freedom using real estate, and so that you can dream again and live those lives that you want to, right? Not because somebody's telling you you have to, work so many hours and you only get weekends off, whatever it is, right? We want you to live the lives you want, travel when you want, whatever it is that you want to pursue.
Now, Kenji and I have been in your positions. We were both more than full-time docs at one point and working all the time, scheduling our time together like a month out. And so we know the pain and suffering that comes from being an overworked doctor. And so this is really important to us. When we see people be successful with real estate who we've trained, it's incredible for us. It's a really fulfilling thing. And this is why we show up and why we do what we do. So at this point, we've actually trained thousands of doctors and high-income professionals, just like you, how to invest in long and short-term rentals. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Zero to Freedom through cash flowing rentals, and that's our kind of basic real estate course where we do several times a year. And then what we're going to be talking about today is Accelerating Wealth, which is our short-term rental course.
Yeah, and I know some you might have questions about both, so you can put that in the Q&A, and we'll definitely address that. All right, well, let's dive into today's topic, which is 100 hours and 100K with short-term rentals. And did you want to explain that, or we just explain that at the end?
We'll explain it while we go through it.
We'll explain as we go through. All right. All right, so the first thing we're going to cover is how one short-term rental can create that life-changing cash flow we were talking about.
And a lot of these pictures, by the way, are pictures from our own short-term rentals. So we'll kind of point out some of our short-term rental pictures as we go along.
So I think there's a big myth going out there, which is I need a giant portfolio of rental properties to make enough cash flow to make a difference in my life. But the truth is that even one profitable short-term rental can make enough cash flow to make a significant difference in your life. And I think, we've seen a lot of our members of our community add short-term rentals to their portfolio because of that high cash flow. And it really, realize that they can achieve their goals a lot quicker. Now, the caveat there is that you need to know how to buy it right. You need to know how to run it profitably. And that's really the key, because it's not guaranteed that you're going to have a profitable short-term rental that's going to generate life-changing cash flow.
So we want to start off, for those of you who are maybe new to the real estate space, and define what cash flow is, because you're going to hear us talk about it a lot. Cash flow is really what sets you free. It's the money that you put in your pocket each month after you pay all expenses on a property. So that includes things like your mortgage, your utilities, property management fees, even down to like Hulu subscriptions and your hot tub cleaning. Like every single expense, once you've paid that, you should still have money left over most months. And the ideal is actually you have a lot of money left over, and that's that cash flow that sets you free to be able to work in your day job as you wish, because you don't rely on trading time for money anymore in your day job, because you have so much cash flow coming in from your real estate portfolio. And that's this kind of status that we got 3 years in, when we had enough cash flow coming in that we said, you know what, we work in medicine by choice now, not because we have to, because our real estate cash flow we can live on. So why do you need cash flow? So cash flow is really important compared to like having a lot of money, for example, in your 401k, because cash flow pays the bills. Having a huge retirement account doesn't help you today if you're not tapping in and kind of draining it over time. It doesn't give you money that you can live on, but cash flow does. It frees you to really cut back and work or quit or do whatever you want. Maybe that's walk out of a job that's not treating you well, or maybe it actually is just staying at the same job, but rediscovering your love of it, which we find a lot of people do, because once being a doctor is a choice again, it's not something you have to do. It tends to reignite people's love.
Yeah, and I think this next quote from Oprah, that's really what wealth does for you. It gives you the freedom to make choices. And so sometimes for some of us, there may be some unfortunate things that happen, right? And so in those situations, you don't have a choice but to make a change, and you may not be able to work clinically anymore. And that's less ideal than setting it up so that you have choices no matter what happens, right? You're ready. And so that's something that we really think about a lot, and I think it's a reason why a lot of people are so interested in achieving that financial freedom. Not because they want to quit their day jobs or quit medicine. That's not what this is about. It's about having those choices to do what they want.
So how do you predict cash flow? How do you know a property is actually a good deal and it's going to cash flow? What we use is a cash on cash calculator. And we actually have a long-term rental cash on cash calculator. And this is the short-term rental cash on cash calculator. And what you do is you plug in all the numbers for a property before you even buy it. So you're predicting how it's going to perform, and you know what kind of cash flow it's going to get even before you buy it. And that's so important, because you're reducing risk that way. One of the keys is having all the right team members to help you put in the right variables into your cash on cash calculator, so you truly predict things with accuracy. You don't want garbage in and garbage out, and you have no idea how a property is going to perform when you buy it, because what you're buying is an investment that should be making you money and making you cash flow. And the cash on cash calculator here, this is actually one of our properties. If we didn't use property management. So you can see there's a property management fee right there that I put the blue mark at. And if we actually use a property manager for ours, so that's 30% additional cost. So we're making in the mid 30s, $30,000 cash flow because we're choosing to use a property manager. But all of that was predictable before we even bought that property.
Yeah. And so you can see the annualized cash flow without that property management, almost $83,000.
Yeah. And I would say it's performing right now in the 70s, but I was trying to give you a sense of how it could perform. So did you know that with just a few short-term rentals, you can actually get to financial freedom? So you just saw that example of our property with the property manager that's performing in the high 70s. Well, this is actually a property of one of our students in Gulf Shore, Alabama. And we actually feature this property in the course, and she's making over $80,000 a year in cash flow. And so you can see how just one or two properties can make a massive difference if if you want to cut back in medicine, or if you want somebody, and maybe as your spouse wants to quit their job, they're not in medicine and they want to quit their job. And that's what actually this person did, is they ended up quitting their job and just doing real estate.
Yeah, and something that maybe a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of times cash flow is tax-free, or a lot of it is sheltered. And the reason why that's important is that if you think about your W-2 job, a lot of that is taxed, right? And so, 80,000 or 100,000 in cash flow is not the same as 100,000 W-2. Actually, 80,000 or 100,000 in cash flow is a lot more than the equivalent amount of W-2 income. So that's why, a number like 80 or 100 is actually a lot more significant than it may sound, when you're thinking about, oh, well, I'm making this much in my W-2. And so that's why we're saying a couple of these can make a significant difference and can get you to that financial freedom. So this is an example of one of our students and also our coaches, one of the coaches in our course. And this is Elisa, and she's a full-time GI doctor. She's also a medical director of an IBD center. I didn't put it on there, but she's also on a number of national boards. She also has 4 children, and she's been public about this next fact, which is that 2 of them have special needs. And even with all that on her plate, over the last 2 years, she has acquired 6 short-term rentals, and combined, they're going to generate multiple 6 figures of cash flow. And even more amazingly, she self-manages all of these, and they're all remote. They're not right next door. These are all in different places, far away from where she lives.
What you'll find is a lot of people in our community are buying their properties remotely because there are ways to harvest the tax savings, which we'll talk about in a little bit, even when properties are remote. And so what they're looking for is the best cash on cash return, the best amount of cash flow, and that's what they're maximizing for. And if the property isn't next door, it doesn't matter. They still have ways to harvest the tax savings, plus then roll in all the cash flow.
All right, so let's move on to number 2. And so number 2 is 2 ways to save on taxes using short-term rentals without cutting back at your day job. All right, so this is also our Dallas short-term rental, by the way. So there's a myth out there, which I think a lot of people have, which is it's only worth investing in real estate if I'm an active investor. And the other myth is that you have to spend more time in real estate than your day job. Well, that's the case if you're talking about long-term rentals and real estate professional status. But with short-term rentals, you can continue to work full-time and still shelter your W-2 or 1099 income. The other myth is that there's a misconception that it's only worth it if you can shelter your current W-2 or 1099 income. But even if you're getting passive losses, those are still extremely valuable. And we're going to talk more about that. All right. So the truth is you can get significant tax benefits as a passive or active investor, either one, and you don't have to cut back. All right, let's first talk about the benefits for passive investors. So the first benefit is that we talked about cash flow, how it's generally sheltered from taxes. And so even if you're passive, imagine if half your income was now coming from tax-free cash flow, then you would effectively be cutting your tax rate in half. And that's a significant tax savings. And so definitely a huge benefit for passive investors. Another benefit is that any excess losses are passive losses, which can shelter passive income today if you have any passive income. A lot of people in our community have passive investments, like maybe in a surgical center. And so they can shelter that income today. Now, I wanted to point out that even if you don't use those passive losses today, you can carry them forward. You never lose them. And so the whole point is that whether it's active losses or passive losses, you're still going to get the benefit. Active losses just means that you can get those benefits today. Passive losses, it might mean that you're going to get those benefits later down the line.
And that usually happens when you sell the property, unless you have passive income coming in from other sources. And then the last thing is when you 1031 exchange into bigger properties, that's also tax deferred. So 1031 exchange is when you take a property, you sell it, and you roll those proceeds into your next property that's larger, and that kind of forms that down payment. We've done a lot of 1031 exchanges where we've taken multiple properties and rolled into a big property with 1031, or taken one property and sold it and moved it into two properties. And the key there is you're really deferring the taxes, and you can defer it until at some point you choose to sell your property without doing a 1031 exchange, at which point you're gonna pay those taxes, but you're also gonna use that passive losses that you created way back when that are gonna help shelter some of the taxes. Or you can do what we're planning to do, which is 1031 until we die. And then we pass our real estate portfolio to our kids, and then they get a step up in basis, it's called, and they don't have to pay all the taxes we've deferred over our lifetime. So real estate really has a special tax status, even if you're not getting real estate professional as a long-term owner, or you're not sheltering income with the short-term rental tax loophole, which is what we're going to talk about next.
All right. So with the short-term rental tax loophole, in the first year, you can use something called bonus depreciation to, as well as other expenses, to shelter the cash flow, but anything left over can be used to shelter that W-2 or 1099 income we were talking about. And it can also shelter K-1 income as well. We've had that question before. But the key is that you have to do something called material participation, which we'll explain. And it just means that you have to be actively involved in your properties. In the second year and beyond, a portion of that cash flow is still tax sheltered, even though you're taking that bonus depreciation, which just means that the depreciation you're taking up front in the first year, the remaining 26 and a half years, you're still getting a decent amount of depreciation. And so your cash flow is still going to be relatively well sheltered. And then for active investors, just like passive investors, you have the ability to 1031 exchange.
And I know we're going to get this question, and it's, can I 1031 from a short-term rental into a long-term rental, or from a long-term rental into a short-term rental? And the answer is yes. This is actually a short-term rental of one of our students. And what you just saw was a short-term rental that's ours in Index, Washington. And I want to just give you an example of what we did with the as active investors in that property.
Sorry. Yep, go ahead.
And so what we did was we were actually able to use that bonus depreciation plus the furniture plus the rehab that we did to create about a $275,000 loss on our tax bill the first year that we owned it. And that sheltered $275,000 of W-2 income or business income. So that's just one example of how you can create these massive losses just from that property, which was a $660,000 purchase, creating almost $300,000 tax shelter out of that one property. It can be pretty significant.
All right, so let's talk about what the requirements are for getting this short-term rental tax loophole. So first thing is that you do need to own the property. So there's other ways to invest in short-term rentals, or maybe it's not investing, maybe it's actually getting a job, which is you can be a co-host, which is essentially being a property manager for somebody else's property. So you don't own those properties. Rental arbitrage is when you lease a property. So you rent an apartment unit and then you furnish it and then put it out on Airbnb or VRBO. That's what's rental arbitrage. The idea is that you're going to make more money listing it as a Airbnb than the rent that you have to pay on it. But again, you don't own that property. You're just renting it from the true owner. So that's the first requirement. And the second requirement is that you do need to materially participate. And so for those who don't know what that is, it just means that you're actively involved. There are 7 tests that the IRS puts out there, and you only have to meet one of those 7. Most of the people who are just getting started, have one property, will choose the material participation test, which is 100 hours. So you spend 100 hours working on your property, and more than anyone else. So more than the contractor, the cleaner. If you do have a property manager, then you do have to do more hours than the property manager. So what a lot of people in our community will do will self-manage their rental property, because oftentimes the property manager will do more hours than them. If you have multiple properties, you can actually switch to a different material participation test, which is you choose the one where it's 500 hours. And so some people will, once they get their second or third short-term rental, they'll shift to this one and do 500 hours across their couple, 2 or 3 properties. And then the other cool thing about material participation is that it can be shared with a spouse. So if you're married and you have one spouse can do 100 hours and you could do 400 hours, right? Or you can split it up any way you want. And that's what we did with our property that we saw on the river there.
Yeah. And so again, what we did was 100 hours more than anyone else in that calendar year. And because we bought it at the end of the year, it actually just meant that we had about 3 months to do that. And then the following calendar year, we handed it over to a property manager and we made it passive. So we moved it from active and claiming that bonus depreciation, which is really why you need to own the property, is so you can claim the bonus depreciation, which creates that huge tax loss for you that first year. And then the second year, we made it passive and handed it off to a property manager.
All right, and why is this important? Well, your tax bill is your single largest expense line item of your life. And so imagine what paying zero in taxes or paying less in taxes can do for your net worth. I mean, I'll tell you, for us, we've sheltered our incomes for the last 7 years using real estate, and it's really grown our net worth significantly because we have that money now to use personally if we needed to, but we actually reinvested it back into our rental real estate portfolio to grow that much quicker.
Yeah, and I really want to highlight that because what a lot of people are doing in our community, which is exactly what we did, was we took all the cash flow and we took all the tax savings and we didn't live on it. We recycled it back and bought more properties. And what that allowed us to do was then create more tax losses to shelter further income and to grow our portfolio much, much faster, which allowed us to achieve financial freedom much faster than we would have if we were living on any of our earnings or living on any of our tax savings. So that kind of diligence and focus made a huge difference in us getting where we are now, much, much faster than if we had quit our day jobs and just done real estate. So we continued to work as doctors. I actually continued to have a job right back into the end of 2020 as a physician.
I was moonlighting. Okay. All right. So then here's another example of this is another one of our coaches, Christina. She's now a part-time ER physician. She had been full-time and she now has cut back to part-time. And in the last 2 years, she has acquired 6 short-term rentals like Elisa. And she also has 16 long-term rental doors. And she invests in multiple different states. And she's nearing her goal of retiring from medicine. But from a tax perspective, in her first year of investing in short-term rentals, she was able to shelter not only the current year's income, but also the income from the following year. And she's generated 6 figures of tax savings each year. All right, let's shift to number 3. And so this is the top 3 mistakes short-term rental owners make and how to avoid them. Okay, so mistake number 1 is making bad investment decisions. And so, we see this very often. I've also, before meeting Leti, I made a lot of bad investment decisions. And so, I bought bad deals and we see that all the time. And so that, what I would define as a bad deal, or one way to define a bad deal, is a property that just doesn't cash flow well enough. And so, as you recall, maybe if you guys read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, if something takes money out of your pocket, then it's a liability, right? And the goal is to collect assets. And with short-term rentals, if you know that you can cash flow, you can generate life-changing cash flow, and you find out that your short-term rental is not generating enough cash flow, well, that's a common occurrence. And so that happens a lot. And the reason why that happens, I think there are 2 main reasons. The first one is that they don't know how to analyze deals properly. And the second one is that they don't have the right buying criteria. And I think the second one may be more of an issue, is that they just don't know what's possible with short-term rentals, right? And so they accept something lower. And so many in our community aim for greater than 20% cash on cash return with property management fees included. And you saw that our property management fees were 30%. And so they're doing greater than 20% cash on cash with property management. So imagine removing property management, what type of cash on cash return our community members are getting. And so it's like that 4-minute mile. Until you see somebody do it, you don't know what's possible. And therefore you're not going to set your criteria there. And that's why we're saying that people they don't have the right buying criteria. The criteria is too low.
And the way to, avoid that is really understanding that cash and cash calculator, having the right team in place so that you're looking at getting all the right variables. So you're actually able to predict how that property will perform. And then having community around you so that you are identifying they're helping you to identify all your blind spots and see the things that you're missing with your cash and cash calculator to make sure that you are actually going to predict how it's going to perform. And that's the key. Team members and community, and then learning how to use that cash and cash calculator, getting those tools and knowledge upfront.
Well, and then a lot of what we cover in the course, which is how to operate your short-term rental profitably, right? Over the long haul. That's really the key. And so, okay, next one, next mistake. So next mistake is not treating each short-term rental as a business. And so a lot of the members in our community are not naturally business people, right? And so it's not surprising that they lack the knowledge or experience to operate a profitable business. And really maintaining profitability requires that you constantly are working at it, right? You're constantly evaluating your business and you're improving it. You're measuring how you're doing. And then based on those measurements, you're improving. And so, and the bottom line is that even though you don't have those skills, you can attain those skills for sure. We're very confident about that, and that's again one of the things that we really focus on in this course is making sure that you understand how to operate a profitable business. Another thing that, and I think one of the reasons why this happens is that people go into these short-term rentals with the wrong focus, and they're focusing on tax savings, right, as a primary, right? And what we're saying is that profitability is more important. Tax savings should be really icing on the cake. At least that's how we handle it. A lot of the members of our community handle it that way.
Yeah, and the reason is because if you're not focused on that profitability and having cash flow, what you end up with is, maybe you save on taxes that first year, but the next year you have a liability and it's costing you money. And that's now a property you have to work to support ongoing. And when you go to sell that property, if you don't 1031 exchange, that tax bill comes back and you need to pay it down the road. And so if you're buying just for taxes, I think that you're missing out and you're putting yourself in a riskier situation by not having that cash flow and now having a liability that you have to work to support. And what you heard Kenji mention, which we should have mentioned in our introduction about who we are, is Kenji's been investing in real estate since 2001. And he's owned short-term rentals since 2008. And so he's been through a lot of downturns too. And so one thing that we're going to talk about is mitigating risk. And this all comes from experience.
There it is. Yeah. Mistake number 3, failing to mitigate risk. And so, what I think one of the main reasons why a lot of people fail to mitigate risk is they're not diligent about applying a framework or evaluating risk. And so one way you can be really diligent about it is to have a framework and apply it every single time you make an important decision and for every single investment that you make. And so what is this framework? Well, the framework involves thinking about the upsides, which is really easy for most people. Almost everybody thinks about the upsides and focuses on those upsides, but you have to be really diligent about thinking about the downsides and really being honest with yourself about those downsides. On top of that, what we also teach is you have to think about what can make those upsides more likely to occur. And on the downsides, what's going to make them less likely to occur? Or if they happen, what's going to make it less painful?
And then not having a backup plan. So one of the things we always think about is, hey, if there's a short-term rental regulation change or something happens like a downturn and you have less vacation renters, what's your backup plan? What are you going to do with the property? What are the ways you can pivot? And you can think about that stuff ahead of time before anything happens and have a plan in place, even when you buy the property. And so that's what we've always done is we always have a backup plan. And this is an example. This is the front yard of our Index Washington property. And we have a backup plan for that. If something happens, we've already forced so much appreciation, which we'll talk about next, that we could go and sell that property and likely at least break neutral at this point, if not make some money if we have to sell it. But also our backup plan originally was like, well, if we have to move into it as a primary residence, we're willing to accept that. And then thirdly, we mitigated risk by we have a portfolio. So it's not like this is our only property and we're relying on this one property for all of our cash flow. And so we mitigated risk within our own portfolio many, many different ways. And so it's possible to do so. But what happens is a lot of times people just don't even think about it. They just see the upsides and they start going.
Yeah. And then, I think another important thing in terms of mitigating risk is to identify those blind spots. And, unfortunately, you don't know what you don't know, right? And it's really helpful to get other people's eyes on the deal. And I think people tend to invest kind of in a vacuum. They don't really kind of share the details of what they're doing with other people. Just think about the people around you. I mean, do you go around in clinic and say, hey, you want to take a look at my deal and my numbers? You just don't do that, right? And so you really need a community of people who can look at your deal, mentors to kind of, help you identify those blind spots, because that's what's going to help you avoid mistakes, helping you see what you can't see.
And Kenji and I personally invest a lot in coaches and other trainings to get people to give us insight. So, I mean, we really believe in this for ourselves and spend money to make this happen.
Okay, and why is this important? Well, so the reason why this is important is if you can eliminate the 3 biggest financial mistakes of your life, your wealth would be exponentially greater. And this is so true for me. You might know the story is that the first 15 years I invested before I met Leti, I made a lot of mistakes. And if I didn't make those mistakes, I would be in such a different place financially right now, a much better place financially for sure. And so this is our mentor. He actually also told us the previous statement as well. But he says, Keith Cunningham says, the key to getting rich and staying that way is to avoid doing stupid things. All right, so let's talk about number 4. And Leti was talking about this with our property on the river there, where we forced depreciation. So how to instantly boost the value of your short-term rental. All right, so the myth here is that if I buy real estate, it's going to eventually appreciate. And the truth is that you don't have to kind of wait for that appreciation. With the right knowledge and skills, you can force appreciation and make it happen reliably. So let's talk about forced appreciation for those who don't know what that is. So forced appreciation, unlike market appreciation, is when you make changes to your property such that all of a sudden it is a different property and valued a lot more. And so an example is you make structural changes to your property. So imagine if you had a 3-bedroom short-term rental and you find space for a 4th bedroom, right? Or maybe an extra bathroom. And so all of a sudden your property is no longer, let's say, a 3-bedroom, 2-bath. It's a 4-bedroom, 3-bath. Right? So it's a completely different property. And when the appraiser goes out and compares your property to other properties, they're not comparing it to other 3 bedrooms anymore. They're comparing it to other 4 bedrooms. And so now it's going to be compared against a completely different group of properties. And therefore, in that situation, you would be forcing appreciation. Another thing you can do is you can improve the design or update things like the kitchen, the high value areas like the kitchen and the bathrooms. You're going to get a lot more bang for your buck, as you guys probably know from watching HGTV, remodeling the kitchen than improving a bedroom, right? The kitchen is so much more valuable. That's where people the family spends their time, and therefore making really good improvements, really good design choices will increase the value of that property.
Now we put plus minus adding amenities. And that's because—
Can you define amenities?
Yeah. So amenities are things like fire pit or, having a game room
yeah.
or having a pool table or something like that, that really increases your cash flow on your property, but maybe doesn't structurally change the building. And so if it was no longer a short-term rental and somebody bought it as a primary residence, that's not really relevant to them anymore, right? Because you took out all the furniture, you took out all the coffee bar and things like that. And so we put plus minus here because with long-term rentals, there is a direct correlation, like with adding increasing the income, decreasing expenses, that, now it's cash flowing more. Now it's worth more to the investor who buys it, and they're seeing it as a business. Short-term rentals are kind of more early on, and we haven't seen a lot of examples of people buying properties because they're cash flowing a certain amount and giving people a higher purchase price because of it. Usually what happens, for example, with a single family home that's a vacation rental that's making a ton of cash flow, is when somebody goes to purchase it, they get an appraisal. And that appraisal is looking at all the other single family homes in the neighborhood and saying, this property is worth this much. And they're not basing that value of that property on the cash flow. And so even if you have some amenities that increase the cash flow, it may not translate into a higher value when you go to sell that property. And so that's why we put that plus minus amenities. This may change over time, but that's not necessarily what we're seeing right now. And so we're very careful to kind of say, we just don't know what this is if this is going to result in that. So the structural stuff that you do, the improving the design with the remodel, that's stuff that you can bank on, that if you sell to a person who's buying for a primary residence, they're going to see that higher value and want to buy it for a higher price. I want to give you an example. And that's our property in Index, Washington. I already described to you how we did a $50,000 remodel, and that was just a lot of paint and fixing up the kitchen, putting, making it a much better design in the kitchen, putting in new cabinets. And so we bought that property for $660,000. We put in about $50,000. And when I asked our agent about 6 months ago, she said, "Oh, you could sell it for $900,000 or $950,000. Now, part of that is market appreciation for sure, because market's been crazy, but a lot of that is forced appreciation because we've made it more attractive with the changes we made in the kitchen and the updating we did to the house, which was just paint inside, but it totally changed the character of the house. And so that's another example of forced appreciation. And we're going to show you another one.
Okay, so this is another one of our short-term rental coaches. And so before, so this is a single family home in a up and coming vacation areas, vacation spot. And so she purchased this property for $248,000. And you can see it's really stuck in the, I don't know, is that 70s? It's really kind of dated. And afterwards, she made significant improvements, not just remodeling, but also some great decor on the inside. They also significantly improved the exterior, making kind of living spaces outside. You can see in that window, there's a mural that she kind of painted herself. And so really kind of made it an attractive, cool place. And so when they went to go appraise this property, it appraised for $440,000. And the remodel, if you're curious, is that it took $50,000 to remodel this property. But
they did a lot of the work themselves. Mm-hmm. And it took them about 6 months to do this, right? To get everything all done.
And so when they refinanced, because of that appraisal, they were able to pull out all their money. They were able to pull out their down payment. They were able to pull out all the renovation costs as well as the furnishing. And so they had none of their own money in this property. And even with that, this property still cash flows $30,000. And they're actually keeping the cash flow lower. They're keeping the occupancy lower because there aren't a lot of cleaners, she said, in this area. And she didn't want to burn out the cleaner with so much turnover. So, and they also didn't want the wear and tear. So they actually are keeping their occupancy around 60%, and they're still cash flowing $30,000.
And that's a strategy that a lot of us use, is actually lower our occupancy, not only to make sure that we're, that we're predicting kind of on the lower end, the more conservative side of how it's going to perform, but also if you lower the occupancy, you can increase the price, and that increase in price can lower the occupancy, and we have a lot less expenses because of that. So we've done that with our short-term rentals as well.
And then they also have the potential to shelter close to 100,000 with this one property. That's based on the bonus depreciation, which we talked about earlier, plus the furnishings, plus the renovation that they did. Okay, so the question of this presentation was 100 hours and 100K, is it possible for me? So kind of stepping back, what does that mean? Well, if you spend 100 hours of material participation, you're actively participating in that short-term rental, and then making 100,000 from that short-term rental. And so what we've shown you in this presentation is, you can buy a profitable short-term rental that can generate tens of thousands of dollars in cash flow. Also, you can generate tens of thousands in tax savings with 100 hours of material participation while continuing to work full-time. And then you can also force appreciation of your short-term rental by 5 or 6 figures. And then when you total all that up, I mean, it's going to be more than 100K that you're making, right? And so, and then the last point is just really important is that, yes, you can also avoid these common mistakes by, number one, having a mentor that's going to help you avoid them, or having a community of people who are going to help you identify those blind spots so you don't make those mistakes. All right. Okay, so so now the question is, I think I missed this. So what's the first step? Sorry, I missed the slide. So if this is something that you want, what is that first step? So, you have two options. The first option is ultimately what we ended up doing back in 2015 when we both started. And looking back, I wish back in 2001 when I started alone, I wish I went option 2, but I did option 1, right? I spent years, in my case, 15 years, figuring it out on my own, making mistakes along the way. Yes, I got caught in that 2007 downturn. It wasn't until 2015, right, that when we got together, we finally kind of landed on a strategy. It took me 15 years to figure that out, right? But even at that point, we didn't follow a proven roadmap. And it's so interesting watching the people in our communities who go through our courses. They are achieving so much more in less time than we ever did. I mean, at this point, we may be ahead of them, but
we're not even ahead of all of them yet. There's people who have almost caught up with us in terms of cash flow. So it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, so it's pretty amazing. And so option 2, follow a proven roadmap with mentorship and community. Again, like I said, I wish that's what I did. And I think a lot of people who are in our community feel the same way. All right. And so, we wanted to talk to you and share our course, Accelerating Wealth. And I think the title says it all. The ideal is with short-term rentals, you can really accelerate your wealth, right? That's what we showed you today. And with this course, it's also called Short-Term Rental Blueprint. And so really kind of sharing with you, how you can achieve it, from whether you're kind of, you are starting from nothing. You might have no real estate knowledge. Maybe you have some long-term rentals and you're wanting to get into short-term rental. Well, it doesn't matter where you are in your journey. We're going to share that blueprint of how to achieve and obtain, buy that profitable short-term rental.
And some of you probably have short-term rentals and you're here because you want to learn how to make them perform better. And we have a community of people like that as well.
All right. So what is an accelerating wealth and how is it going to help you? The first thing is we're going to help you get your team in place in your chosen market. And this is something that can really shortcut your journey significantly. Having the right agent. Remember when we first started, we had the wrong type of agent and we were kind of spinning our wheels for about 3 months until we found the right agent. So that's just one example of having the right team member that can really speed up the process of getting a short-term rental under your belt. And if you guys are trying to shelter income this year, right, this is a great time to buy a short-term rental. You have, another 8 months to go in the year to buy a short-term rental, get it set up and get it out there on Airbnb and VRBO. This is the perfect time to get started, I think. The next thing that Accelerating Wealth will help you with is avoid those common mistakes we talked about, and that's going to accelerate the growth of your portfolio. Also, we, in addition to us as mentors, we also have hired coaches, and we've introduced you to a couple of them. You can see that they're very experienced and have done a great job building up their portfolios, tapping into the tax savings and generating multiple six figures of cash flow.
We actually also have mentors who are volunteer who come into our course and are in the Facebook community, also teaching and answering questions. So it's us plus coaches plus mentors.
And then also, in addition to that support, you have that community, right? And I think the community is so important. I mean, if you think about having somebody investing in the same market. Let's say you're both in California and you're investing in Florida, right? It's great to have that person that you can kind of turn to and say, hey, how is it going for you, right? Also, imagine if you're investing in Florida, having somebody local there in the community who's like, hey, yeah, I know that area really well, right? And so that's the power of that community. And we talked about helping you identify those blind spots. That's what the community can help you do. Also, learning how to determine the difference between a good investment and a bad one. And this is what we were talking about earlier, right? Until you see what other people are doing, it's really hard to know what is a good investment. And so that's what we want to share with you, is that the people in the community have done some incredible things. You saw G there with that $248,000 property, forcing that appreciation of 440. Well, now that you know that's possible, you're like, okay, well, that's what I want to do. And then also learning how to mitigate risk with short-term rentals. It's a big part of our course, is really helping you limit those mistakes by thinking through your investment decisions, thinking through every step of the way as you're acquiring your short-term rental and setting it up, helping you kind of mitigate risk along the way.
And I'm sure we're going to get some questions at the end of this about, when is the downturn coming? What's going to happen to short-term rentals when the downturn comes? And we're going to get questions about short-term rental bans in certain areas. And this is the kind of stuff that we really focus on teaching, because you want to buy the right deal that you've thought about all these things ahead of time and you've mitigated the risks. And we've showed you with forced depreciation how you can mitigate risk if there's a downturn, but there's many other methods to mitigate risk so that make sure that you do well in the long haul. And that's really our goal, is for our community to do well even when the downturn comes, because it is going to come.
Yeah, and also avoiding mistakes like buying a short-term rental where short-term rentals are banned. We've seen a handful of cases of that. It definitely does happen. So you got to really watch out. And then also implementing those short-term rental tax strategies. There's actually a lot of cool strategies beyond the one that we just shared with you, where, as Leti liked to say, use your properties as chess pieces and kind of use some long-term rentals and short-term rentals and kind of combine them in a way where you can kind of really maximize the tax benefits. And, this is really our goal. By the time you finish Accelerating Wealth, we want you to have the confidence to buy your first short-term rental property and then get started in building your empire. All right, so let's kind of look inside Accelerating Wealth a little bit. We assigned a $5,000 value to it. We think that, if we can shave off 3 months of time getting your short-term rental set up, it's worth way more than that, but we just put a value of 5,000 on it. So, Accelerating Wealth, it has 5 pre-recorded modules covering everything from mindset. If you don't know, if you've never worked with us before, you know that we believe that psychology is 80% of your success. And so we really invest time in working on setting you up for success in terms of mindset. Next is strategy, right? We talked about making sure that you buy that very profitable short-term rental. And so you need to have the right strategy for that. And then the tools you'll need for being successful. And so one thing we wanted to mention was that as soon as you buy it, you'll get access to the entire course. And that's actually unlike our other course, Zero to Freedom, where we kind of release the modules 1 week at a time. Next is you also get access to our short-term rental blueprint. You also get, there's tons of worksheets and checklists in there. And other useful downloads. So just imagine having a whole list, a room by room checklist for setting up your short-term rental to make sure you don't miss something and have to, especially for those of you doing this remotely, you don't want to have to travel 3,000 miles and then forget something and then have to fly back just to do that one thing. So we want to make sure that you make use of that time really efficiently and don't forget anything. And those checklists are really invaluable for that. You also get mentorship by us and 3 experienced coaches. And as Leti mentioned, we have volunteer mentors as well. And think about it, what it really does is it just expands your network of people whose experiences you can draw upon. They have experiences in different markets. They also have differences with different types of properties, right? And so that's the benefit of having all of that support.
And one thing we didn't also put in here is we have a team member at SRMD who has experience managing over 50 short-term rentals as a property manager. And so she actually is going to be involved in a lot of the Q&As and lending that kind of property management side from her experience too.
Yeah, well, I thought you were going to say something else, which is that something else we didn't include in here is that when we developed the course, we set up an advisory board of 5 experienced short-term rental owners. And so this was developed in conjunction with them and also the team member who has deep experience. And so, this course is not just based off of like one, our personal experience. It's based off of a collective experience from a very experienced group of short-term rental operators. All right. So the course also is supported by weekly live Q&As. So you get all that content. It's pre-recorded content in 5 modules. But on top of that, we're going to do Q&As once a week, and it's going to be led by either us or one of the coaches, along with the team member that we just mentioned. You're going to have access to our trusted team of vendors. And these are just a few of them, but you also have access to a number of others. Also, you're going to get community support. We talked about the value of that in our Facebook groups. And one of the great things about it is, these are a like-minded group of people who are in very similar situations. They have high incomes, they have similar tax issues, right? And they're trying to shelter their income. But also they're trying to generate these profitable profitable short-term rentals, so they have options. And
we invite your spouse or significant other into that Facebook community as well. We like it when people are learning together with their significant other and setting goals and going through the journey together. And oftentimes it's not the physician who's taking the lead in building the real estate portfolio. It's the significant other, the spouse. And so we recognize that, and we welcome spouses in as well.
This next one's a huge value, exclusive access to our network of short-term rental agents. You can only get access to our agents if you've taken one of our courses. And so we're talking about saving time. We wasted time with the wrong type of agent. Not that they were bad agents. They were actually amazing agents, but they just weren't suited for what we were looking for. And so you want to really make sure that your agent, if they're a short-term rental agent, they have that network of cleaners and handymen and property managers if you're going to use them, right? Ultimately, they need to help you shortcut your journey as well, right? And so that's the type of short-term rental agent that you want. Also somebody who can analyze those deals as well. And then finally, this is something new. It's an opportunity to earn CME. And so one thing I wanted to point out is that the CME is not based on the content. The CME is based on your reflection of the content. And so we're using a CME provider that creates these opportunities for reflection and recording it. And that's how we're able to offer CME with this course.
And so if you want details on the CME, definitely go look at the course landing page, and there's some links so you can go look at the CME provider as well.
Yeah, and if our team can kind of Kirsten put the link in there to that. All right, and so this is the homepage. As you kind of we use a platform called Kajabi. There's also a phone app for that, so you can kind of watch things on your phone. It's really actually a great way of being efficient with your time.
Yeah, and for those of you who already own Zero to Freedom or Empire Builders, then this would just show up on there. And again, you would get all of the content as soon as you purchase. So you purchase today, you can start working through the modules right now. And for the Zero to Freedom people, I know you're going to go through fairly quickly. You have a lot of baseline knowledge, and so you have the opportunity to just spin through pretty quickly instead of doing it how we did it previously with Zero to Freedom, which is dripped out over a number of weeks.
All right, and this is inside the modules. Again, like we said, pre-recorded videos, and then it's not illustrated here, but you have handouts, worksheets, those types of things, downloadables that you can also, in addition to the video, some written content, there's also some downloadables as well.
And then finally, we wanted to let you know there's a risk-free guarantee. And this guarantee is basically like, you can go through the entire course and to the final Q&A. And if you don't feel like you have the knowledge and tools necessary to make 6 figures of income from short-term rentals, you can ask for your money back. We are so confident that going through this course, that you will clearly feel and know that you have enough tools and strategies and the team members to be able to do that, that you won't be asking us for our money back. And that's why we created this risk-free guarantee.
So very risk-free. Okay. All right. So if you want to get started today and join us, it's one payment of $21.99. The link is right there. So, if you're interested, click on the link, and our team will also put the link in the chat. Okay, so let's jump into the Q&A portion. I see a number of questions here. So let me just stop the share here. Okay. And so I see a lot of stuff in the chat, but we're going to go based off of the Q&A. So Lim family, we're looking at a property that currently has a tenant, but we want to make it a short-term rental. Do you know how that would work as far as taxes?
Yeah, so a short-term rental is really defined by the IRS on the length of stay. And so it needs to be an average length of stay of 7 days or less. Mm-hmm. And so if you really want to make it a short-term rental, what you might consider doing is trying to figure out how to get the tenant out of there so that you don't buy the property and suddenly they're staying there for 30 days. And now you have only to the rest of the year to try to figure out how to lower the average length of stay. And so what we oftentimes will do with long-term rental tenants is we'll offer something called cash for keys, where we say, hey, listen, we know you got a lease for 5 months left, but we're willing to pay you a couple $1,000s if you leave, next week. And you could potentially even do that during the due diligence period if you can get the current owner on your side and say, hey, can we offer this for them now so that we're going to go through and purchase this, but by the time we purchase it, they're almost ready to move out. That's the ideal, because you really do want to keep that average length of stay of 7 days or less to make sure you can get that short-term rental tax loophole. Now, if the tax loophole isn't something that you're worried about, then you can wait it out and then convert it into a short-term rental. But I'm presuming that's what you're trying to do.
One thing we neglected to mention is that we are not accountants or lawyers, right?
Yes.
So, so anything we say here, and we're going to say this oftentimes, and this is true because a lot of the views of or how the accountants handle certain things, it's different, and so there may be some differences in recommendation on how you should handle the situation. All right, Arpit. Does it make sense to buy now at the peak of the market can barely make 6 to 8% on long-term rentals? Well, I guess I might say, Arpit, there are people in our community doing better than that. So again, it's that standard, right? It's like, what constitutes a good investment? And so I think what you're saying is that, yeah, you're, now that you know that it's possible, right? Then maybe, you'll be going for higher cash on cash, but I think you should be able to get higher cash on cash than 6 to 8%, even in this environment. But when we're talking about short-term rentals, that's what this course is about. It's really about helping you learn how to not only set that standard, but also how to then operate it profitably over time. And a lot of that does involve buying it right and making sure that you're doing the analysis correct up front. But you have to kind of set that standard of what you're looking for and then go out there and look for it.
Yeah. And a lot of it does come down to your team, and also recognizing hidden values, recognizing ways you can increase income and decrease expenses, and making those changes so that you can take a property that maybe is operating poorly. And, we buy long-term rentals that are negative cash on cash when we buy it, but what we see is the potential of what it can become. And that's the key. If you can see what it can become with the changes that you're going to make, then you can get it operating much, much better, even as a long-term rental than you're describing at 6 to 8%.
Yeah. One of the keys to operating your short-term rental really profitably is you got to figure out a way to stand out. Right. And so it's just imagine a market like the Smokies where every cabin looks exactly the same. And so, right. So how are you going to get the customers to pick yours over somebody else's? And so that's what we're talking about. You got to make it stand out. And that's how you achieve those higher numbers. All right, Tyler and Jessica. Hey guys, how do you maintain financial benefits of a short-term rental after year one? How does one get financial benefits of a short-term rental in year one if others are participating in the property? I think you were talking about the tax benefits, maybe?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Yeah. So after year one, most of us are trying to get shelter active income year one. So we're taking a bulk of bonus depreciation year one. So we're taking, the first 20 years of depreciation year one. And so year two, we're going to have less depreciation because all we have is the last 7.5 years that are now going to be spread over 26 years, right? So we have less depreciation. So if you bought it right, you're going to show a gain, and you're going to have to pay taxes on that gain that second year. Now, ways you can shelter that income: go buy another short-term rental. If you're not being an active investor the second year, you're not doing material participation, you just handed it off to a property manager. Well, now you have passive income, right? And so you guys could use your long-term rentals that are creating passive losses to shelter that passive income. And so that's this playing chess piece that Kenji was mentioning earlier. You think about active and passive income. You decide which properties you want to be active on versus passive on. You buy different properties to shelter other properties' income, and you can actually move and kind of change things actively with strategy. So an example is that short-term rental in Dallas that we bought it in November of last year. We set the average length of stay of 8 days or less in 2021. And that made it a long-term rental. And that allowed us to group it with all of our other long-term rentals and get the tax benefits on a real estate professional. And now it's a short-term rental. So we get to kind of switch on and off based on the average length of stay. So you can, if you work with your CPA with tax strategy, you can really accomplish a lot and be very smart about maximizing tax benefits. And then the financial benefit or the tax benefits in year one, if you're trying to get the 100 hours and more than anyone else, what we did, for example, with our index property is we did a very small renovation because we didn't want to be in the situation that we ever get audited and the IRS says, well, you did this major rehab. Of course, the contractors did more time than you guys did with your 100 hours, or well, we did over 100 hours and we document all of our hours, right? So we can always prove it. So we chose to do a smaller renovation. We have some students who will put off the renovation until the next calendar year. So there's no question. And then we have at least one CPA that we know of who's saying, well, you don't group all the contractors and subcontractors hours together. It's what each individual did. That's a little bit outside the norm of what the other CPAs are saying. But if you believe that's reasonable and you believe that read, then you might choose to do it that way with the CPA.
Okay. Good answer. All right, Joseph. What if we purchased? What if what we purchased did renovations and placed in service? How does cost seg and 100% accelerated depreciation on Schedule C look in the situation? What went wrong? Joseph, you sounds like you have some good knowledge there. Let's see. Placed in service.
So first of all, usually it's on Schedule E.
Yeah, I mean, if you're providing hotel-like services, it might be placed on Schedule C, Schedule C, but otherwise, yeah, usually on oftentimes on Schedule E.
And so some of the ways that we're creating those losses are bonus depreciation. So we're doing a cost segregation study and doing bonus depreciation. Also, rehabs can generate a lot of losses as well. And I don't know exactly what went wrong in your situation, why you didn't get that tax benefit. I don't know if it wasn't considered a short-term rental or what happened with you and your CPA. But if you feel like something didn't kind of translate out, you might get a second CPA's opinion.
Yeah, I mean, so a lot of times did you say those renovations should be
also losses?
There should be losses on there unless they're capitalizing some of them, but you could do a bonus, you could do depreciation again on after the renovation and use bonus depreciation for a lot of those components. So yeah.
So I think it's really, you got to sit down with your CPA and look at your unique kind of situation and say, hey, this is what I did. What are we missing here? And are you sure it should be on Schedule C, not E? Yeah, and you might want a second opinion. Honestly.
Yeah, the cool thing is though, in the communities, right? In our communities, there's enough experienced people in there, and you can, us too, and you can post it, right? Post what happened, and then kind of take a look at it. Of course, you'd still want to talk to your accountant, right? But the idea being that you can go in armed with like, hey, I got different perspectives from our community, and this is what they said, right? And so that's one benefit. All right, son, with increased mortgage rates, is it still worth it? If so, then up to what level of interest rate is it still worth to invest in short-term rentals?
So this is a great question because we don't have a standard in our community of like, we're saying, hey, you can only get cash and only buy properties with this much cash and cash. Everyone's choosing what cash and cash makes sense for them. And sometimes it'll even change per deal. Even for us, some properties we accept lower cash and cash than other properties. And really, you're setting your own standard. What you're doing is you're putting into the cash and cash calculator. And as the interest rates go up, you're putting more a higher interest rate in there. And then you get to decide, does this cash and cash return of this individual property with this interest rate still make sense? Or is it not a good deal and I don't want to purchase it anymore?
Okay. I think the other thing, son, is that, the other thing, son, is that, it's like property taxes. So there are some states where property taxes are really high. And what happens, it gets priced in to the price. And so if interest rates go up, then there's going to be a downward pressure on prices, right? Because people are doing the analysis, right? They're analyzing these deals. And if mortgage rates go up and the cost of those loans go up, then that's going to factor into those calculators, right? And so you won't buy those properties. You're just going to have to find better and better deals at the end of the day. Your criteria is not going to change, son. If the mortgage rates goes up, then you just have to find better and better deals, or there's going to be downward pressure on those prices.
Yeah.
Okay. So the next one, Marissa, how did you get insurance for $600 per year? So let's see here. So
oh yeah, that is at 600. That one may not be accurate, that number, because I don't know exactly what it ended up at, and I don't know what.
It's not that far off. I understand, Marissa. So you're bringing up a good point. So short-term rental insurance, for those who don't know, is more expensive than regular homeowners insurance. And we've definitely had people in our community, or not in our community, but we've definitely heard of people before they were in our community. Actually, I could say are now in our community, telling us stories where for they didn't know that you needed special short-term rental insurance, so they were operating their short-term rentals with homeowners insurance. So something that's really important. So you're right, Marissa. It may be a little bit off there, but I don't think it's actually that far off. All right, Bjorn, what will happen next year when you can no longer bonus depreciate in the first year?
Yeah, I think we answered that. You'll show a profit, and then you'll probably want to buy another property to try to shelter that profit.
Yep. Tessa, can you share the 100-hour material participation requirement with a spouse? Yes. Or only the 500 hours? No, you can share the 100 hours. That's what we did with that river house.
Yeah, and we went over 100 hours just in case we ever get audited and there's ever a challenge for what kind of activities we spent our time doing. We wanted to make sure we had an access. And so we track all of our hours and the activities that we spent on it. And so we keep all of those in case we ever get it audited.
Yeah, Sandra says, our accountant states that W-2 income can't be sheltered if our income is greater than 150,000 unless we file our LLC as a separate business. How do we approach this? That's just not true. I think, ultimately, I would talk to a real estate CPA. I guess when people,
we know it's true because we do it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So no, I know exactly what they're referring to when there's that's why, there's a real estate professional status and a short-term rental tax loophole. There's two different types of ways to shelter that income, even if your income is greater than 150,000. But you're right. When you have income above 150,000, you can't use real estate to write off W-2 income unless you have real estate professional status or you're taking advantage of the short-term rental tax loophole. So, you have a choice. You could try to educate your CPA, or you can kind of work with a real estate CPA. All right, Tessa, where do you reliably get rental income info? It's a great question. This is the most important variable, I think. And so
you really triangulate it from many different sources.
You get it from many different sources. I think that there's a misconception that you do the cash on cash once, and then you kind of put it away in the shelf. The bottom line is throughout the purchase process, even before the purchase process, and throughout the purchase process, you're constantly updating the occupancy and the average daily rate, right? You're coming up with more and more reliable numbers by getting input from multiple different sources. Some of this might be online data sources like AirDNA. Other places, others will be from real people, or you may actually do something called the enemy method and look at properties close to you that are similar to your property and see how they're operating, right? And so, ultimately, the more accurate that number is, then the more likely your property is going to perform exactly as you predicted.
Yeah, and we run multiple scenarios. Actually, one thing that I usually mention is that a lot in our community will run multiple cash on cash calculators, even run what it's going to operate like as a short-term rental, but also if there were short-term rental ban, how would it operate as a long-term rental, and run multiple cash on cash calculators too.
Okay, so let me see here. Bjorn, second, how do you transition from active management greater than 100 hours to passive model?
We handed it over to a property manager. That's what we did.
Yeah, you just don't do those hours, right? And you can make it passive.
Right. And we'd have to do 100 hours and more than anyone else that second year, but there's no point in doing it because at that point we had claimed a lot of the losses and we were going to be positive that second year with the cash flow.
Yeah. Nancy, how can you harvest tax savings from a short-term rental of house hacking?
So oftentimes what CPAs will do is they'll kind of try to separate out the pieces. So for example, if you have a duplex and one side's a short-term rental and one side is your house hacking, they'll separate out the expenses of each area and let you take bonus depreciation of that one part of your house. Same with like an ADU. People will that's what a lot of CPAs will do. So you really need to talk to your CPA and see if it's just one bedroom in the house that you're doing as a short-term rental, that's going to be even more tricky. But some CPAs may be able to kind of separate out the expenses or a portion of the expenses to help you with that tax benefit. But it may not be worth it too. So you really need to talk to your CPA.
What if they're talking about a single family home that they live in?
Yeah, I think then you would be renting out part of a room, right?
Part of a room, yeah, maybe, yeah, or moving out and sleeping on somebody's sofa whenever it's rented.
Well, but then if you're using the property a significant amount, you're going to negate a lot of your tax savings.
It's going to be treated as a personal residence, right?
Yeah. And so again, talk to your CPA and make sure you have a strategy in place rather than getting to the end of the year and then finding out you couldn't have done anything.
Yeah. Okay. Lillian, the ideal team of advisors for short-term rentals to make a strategy and do research and make accurate assessment. Do you guys provide a list of them as part of this course?
Yes. And we go into detail on how to find each member of your team and the questions to ask. And so those are all really outlined and there's data.
Arpit, how is it possible to get to greater than 20%? I'm assuming 20% cash on cash return. Do you recommend a group or agent to help you find these?
So we usually use agents, although I would say both our short-term rentals I found and I brought them to our agents.
Yeah.
Kenji does have a real estate license, but we don't use it that way. We use our agents because usually they bring the value of negotiating and add that value that makes it worth it. So some of our agents will bring us off market deals, but often with short-term rentals, they're actually on market deals if you're just buying a single family home. And I found both of ours just on Redfin.
Yeah. And then how is it possible to get to greater than 20%? I mean, it's a lot of it, right? Is how you operate the property. And so you'd be surprised at how poorly people operate it without the right training, without knowing how to operate it. What is considered best practice, right? And that's what we dive into a lot in this course.
Actually, I'm going to give an example. So Christina Tran, one of her examples is in the course, and she bought an already operating short-term rental, and she just did the furniture and improved what it looked like, and she was able to increase the income $40,000 per year just with those changes. And so, let's even say 50% of it goes to expenses. That's $20,000 she just added. And so you can see how if you get those skills to not operate like a mom and pop landlord, you can make a lot more money.
Yep. Karthik, location, how to be profitable in a high cost of living area with short-term rental. Yeah, so you're saying, purchase price is so high, so you got to really make really great cash flow or really, really high nightly rate or high occupancy, right? And so, yeah, so you have to really stand out. That's the key. And so, I'll give you an example of a property in Orlando. It's a themed rental where, you go inside, it's like a Star Wars theme, and like the kids go, they just out of the mind sleeping in a room that's all Star Wars theme, right? And so they get nightly rates of $600 when the average is about 200 or 300 in the area. That's on weekdays. On weekends, they get over 2,000 a night. Okay. In this area, again, 200 to 300 on average a night. They're getting 2,000 on a weekend. Okay. So that's one way. And I'm just throwing out one way, but I'm just saying that you just have to figure out how to stand out in your area.
And that's going to bring an increase in income, but you also need to look at decreasing expenses,
yep,
right? And figure out how to do that, because that'll ultimately add to your profit margin as well. And then also buy it right. I mean, if you can get a deal and get it at a discount, that's going to help your numbers as well.
Yeah. Ushma, I'm from Canada. Yeah. Love Canada. The taxation is a bit different. I don't know with real estate market here if it'll work. Yeah, so we've been having a lot of conversations with real estate agents in Canada. We also have actually 2 accountants who have practices in Canada. And so talking to them, and we have also had some Canadians go through our program. But talking to them, yeah, totally understand. Yeah, the taxation part is very different, but the real estate part is very similar, right? And so can you operate a profitable short-term rental in Canada? Absolutely, as long as there aren't any bans or restrictions in the areas that you're in. I know that there are some places where short-term rentals are being severely restricted. So that's something that you really have to evaluate and pick areas where they don't have those types of bans. And so, yeah, so from a operating a short-term rental, running it profitably, I don't see a lot of differences.
I'll also say that the CPAs that we have, who we refer students to, also have Canadians investing in the US. And so that's always an option too. The US has a lot of tax benefits. A lot of them won't translate to, Canada, but, it may be the opportunity for you to at least take some of the advantage of the US tax system on your short-term rentals too.
Any thoughts on short-term rental occupancy taxes in Dallas, Fort Worth, Frisco, McKinney areas in Texas? No, I don't have any specific thoughts except to just make sure that you incorporate those into your numbers and account for them. And again, you're not changing your criteria, right? So if any of these line items like interest rate, or I should say principal and interest payments, or property taxes or occupancy taxes, if any of these things are super high, you just factor it in. And then you have to perform better in other areas, either decreasing expenses in other areas or increasing expenses or increasing your income nightly rate or your occupancy. Okay, Ushma, having a hard time finding the right deal, which will be cash flow positive. Yeah, it's absolutely. Yeah. So it's not surprising in this type of market, but we see it all the time. It can be done. All right.
Yeah. And a lot of it may be team too. So make sure you have the right team members in place and make sure that you're looking for hidden value and make sure you're being creative and you have the skills and knowledge to know how to increase income and decrease expenses.
Yeah. Okay. Also, do you have to change CPAs when you started investing in short-term rentals, or is the average CPA knowledgeable enough about the tax laws, loopholes, and 1031 tax changes?
The average CPA does not know about a lot of this stuff. Some of the worst stuff we've seen is people who should have gotten real estate professional and they have $1 million of passive losses just because their CPA didn't know about it. So I would say you generally want a real estate knowledgeable expert CPA to be your tax strategist. They're more expensive, but ideally they're saving you in a lot because of their knowledge. And so we pay a lot for our CPAs, but they do save us a lot of money, and we can bring strategy to them and feel very confident that they know the loopholes and that they can help us think through strategies so that we stay out of trouble.
Yeah. For the doctors in the group, it's like going to a specialist versus having your family practice or internal medicine doctor, I should say, me, internal medicine doctor doing a surgery. You don't want me to doing any surgeries. All right, Nick, have you all used syndications to purchase short-term rentals? No, but there's definitely
there are people doing that now.
There's some people in our groups that are doing things like that, looking at bigger properties. And I like to think about like boutique hotels or large retreat centers, buying a lot of land with a lot of cabins, for example. Definitely a lot of great opportunity out there. The hotels are especially interesting because of everything that happened with COVID. There was a lot of pressure on those mom and pop operators of those. So there was a lot of opportunity, people selling their hotels or motels. All right, Okam, how do you find strong cash flow positive properties at a national level?
So what we do is people focus on one market and build a depth of team in that market and build a depth of knowledge so that they're able to really understand where the loophole or where the holes are in the market so that they can fill those holes and stand out, and then know how to predictably do the cash on cash because they've seen so many deals in that market that they're able to kind of, know how it's going to perform ahead of time. So I would say that looking at the national level, you may decide, I want to focus on this market and go deep on it. And that's how you're going to be able to find those cash flow positive properties that meet your criteria, rather than trying to say, hey, I'm going to have teams in 10 different places and kind of splinter your focus.
Okay, Kyle, for these short-term rentals, most seem to be more luxury or Class A type. How are you furnishing these? Are you buying new? Have you experienced delay in delivery of things like beds, couches, that have been prevalent since the pandemic? If so, how are you planning around this? Yeah, Kyle, so it requires a lot of planning. Well, let me answer your first question first. I think there's a misconception that short-term rentals need to be in these vacation areas and whatnot. But I think some of the best performing ones are not in those vacation areas, but maybe more in urban areas and maybe not necessarily those A types, right? Some of those ones that are more affordable. There are a lot of niches you can pursue. You don't have to pursue the vacation rental niche or, the Class A types. There's plenty of potential business for Class B or people who are looking just for a place to work for a couple of months, digital nomads, they're not necessarily staying in Class A. type places if they don't make a lot of income.
However, if the average length of stay is over 7 days, then it's going to be a midterm rental, which is grouped with the long-term rentals.
From a tax perspective, but I mean, you're still going to be making great cash flow on those properties. Yeah. So I don't know if you're talking about it from a tax perspective, Kyle, but if you're not talking about it from a tax perspective, then it opens up a lot of opportunities for, let's say, traveling nurses, midterm rentals. There's still furnished rentals, right? So I kind of still view them as short-term rentals. I'm not thinking about it from a tax perspective, which is 7 days or less is the average length of stay. But yeah, so I do see members of our community taking their duplexes, for example, and turning them into short-term rentals to maximize that cash flow on that duplex. And I think that's great opportunity for that for sure.
And we have experienced a delivery delay. Our first short-term rental, I ordered things from Pottery Barn and it was super delayed. We ended up going to IKEA and building a lot of backup, and then took almost a year to get our dining room table from Pottery Barn. So you definitely have to take that into account and make sure that you're ordering things ahead of time. Sometimes even before you close, people are ordering things. And then what we did with our Dallas one is we actually used a local designer who sourced a lot of the stuff for us. We were able to do that because we didn't need the 100 hours and more than anyone else, because we made it a long-term rental with our average length of stay. But that turnaround was like less than 2 weeks. We had it out rented. So there are ways to source things with local stores that already are stocked as well.
Yeah, and think about it from the hours perspective, right? What a great way to kind of get some hours by you have to source every piece of furniture, decor, and get it there, right? Especially if you're long distance, you're going to have to make sure that you deliver it. Somebody's there to get the delivery. You have to time it so it's there when you're there, right? So yeah, so there's going to be a lot of work involved in making sure and coordinating that whole thing.
Yeah. So somebody was asking about next time this course is going to be launched. It's not actually until 2023. So this is the only time this year that you can get the course. So if you you're going to want a short-term rental this year, I would highly suggest buying the course. It's available to you. The content's available to you, for lifetime. Yep. The Q&As are going to be recorded. And so if you can't make the Q&As, they'll be recorded and uploaded into the course. So you will still have access to those Q&As. The Facebook community will be open for about 6 weeks. And so you can go in there and ask questions. If you don't get through all the content and you have more questions, you can always reach out to us and join Empire Builders when you are ready. And in Empire Builders is our community for advanced investors. And you can come in there and ask those questions as you're going through the course, or you can ask them in Semi-Retired Physicians, which is a free community as well.
Yeah. And then there's something called a reboot too, right? So,
oh, yes.
Yeah. So there's a reboot.
That's a great point.
Yeah. So let's say that, you just don't get to the content till later in the year, but you also want the live components again. So what you can do is you can buy at a very low cost, a reboot, which just means going through the course again with the next cohort in the beginning of next year.
Yeah, and the reboot for like Zero to Freedom, our other course, there's usually 30 to 40 people who will go through the entire course again, just to have the access to the coaches and the Q&As and the community. And so that's a very common thing that a lot of people do, is buy the reboot, which is usually $300 or so, and go through the course again. And somebody was asking about the Dallas event. I think it's probably going to be May 14th is my plan right now. I'm giving us a little bit more time to kind of finalize it, but that's the date so far.
Yeah. Mark, how much time is typically involved when you self-manage a short-term rental? Yeah, this is a great question, Mark. It really does vary depending on how much you're doing. But, I think that 100-hour threshold, for whatever reason, I think it's pretty reasonable amount of time to, get your property set up and maybe do a little bit of light repairs and things like that. If you're doing more repairs and renovations, then I could see it taking longer for sure. But just to give you an example, the one example, the Gulf Shores one that we showed you a picture of, that one, our student went there and set it up in about 7 days, and she spent about maybe 10 hours a day. And then on top of that, she was self-managing, right? So there were a number of hours
and she
associated with
also,
that.
I mean, there's time you spend doing due diligence and all
true.
that stuff
So
up
maybe
front.
well more than 100 hours.
And then Elisa Krim, she's self-managing 6 of them, and so she says it only takes a couple hours a week to do that. And so it's once you get it up and running, it's much less. But it does take some initial effort up front.
That's true. Yeah, Mark. Yeah, sorry, Nick. I was just talking about the startup initial phase, but yeah, once it's up and running, and that's the other part of the course that we incorporate a lot of. We cover all, buying setting up like vacation rental software and automating a lot of things and integrating a lot of things into that vacation rental software to make things more efficient, right? And so we talk a lot about that. Remember, we talked about running a profitable short-term rental business. Well, a lot of running a profitable short-term rental business is putting in place systems and processes, right? And so that allows you to automate, eliminate, and delegate a lot of these tasks.
Okay. And then, so there was a question about the difference between the course and Zero to Freedom.
Okay. Yeah. So, no, it's a very common question. Yesterday, somebody said, well, think about Zero to Freedom as residency. And then this course, the short-term rental course, is like fellowship, right? And so, Zero to Freedom, it really teaches you the foundation of kind of buying cash flow rentals of any type. But then think about it. From there, a lot of our students are going out and maybe buying storage units, or they might be investing in assisted living facilities, right? And so imagine an assisted living facility like that. That's a whole course in itself, learning all the regulations about operating an assisted living facility. Same thing here, operating a short-term rental. There's really specialized knowledge you need to know to operate that profitably, right? And so somebody asked the question, is there much overlap between Zero to Freedom and accelerating wealth? And I think there's very little overlap. Maybe, what'd you say yesterday, 5%?
Yeah, 5% or so.
Maybe about less than 5% overlap. So you're going to be learning completely new stuff. And we were very intentional about that. We wanted to make sure that, this was for our Zero to Freedom students, the people who took that this was a completely, different experience and value add. Okay. Let me see here. Jason, what are good ways to estimate expenses? HOA fees are listed, but how about water, sewer, electric, landscaping? I tried to discuss estimates with my insurance company, got no answers for insurance coverage to use when screening potential rentals.
Usually insurance companies, like at least investor friendly, can give you a sense of the cost per square foot in that area. It's a little bit rough because they can't tell you, oh, you have this kind of roof and it's this old, or you have this kind of electrical work and it's this old. So you're gonna, during due diligence, when you get the details about the property, you're gonna get a better estimate for insurance coverage. But usually getting the square foot cost per square foot in your area will give you a rough estimate. For landscaping, you're gonna over time kind of start developing it, or you can do during due diligence, reach out to some landscapers and get some real numbers.
Get real numbers.
Electric and water, sewer, you can call the city and actually find out, or call the electric company and find that out. Even if you don't own the property, they can generally give you that information of what it's been on average for the last year.
They'll give you the average for the last 12 months. So it's
just call.
Completely accurate. And so, so that's the key, right? And that's what we teach with the cash on cash calculator, is the more accurate your estimates, the more likely it's going to perform exactly as you predicted. And so we're going to go line by line and show you how to get those estimates.
Yeah. And I just want to note, for Empire Builders, we don't let people into Empire Builders, our advanced community with all advanced investors, until people take our courses. That's the only way you get into Empire Builders. And so Empire Builders has 1,400 people in it right now. And those are only people who have taken our courses previously. Then they get that chance to come in, because we need to all speak the same language. And we need to, be part of the same community of abundance and lifting each other up. I never have to intervene at all. Everyone is so positive and takes care of each other. It's a really amazing community, and we protect it and make sure it stays that way.
Yep. Okay, Vani, are remote management hours considered to be applicable for the 100-hour rule? Yes. Again, we're not CPAs, but I would say that in general, of course.
Lots of people are doing that in our community. Yeah. You guys kept a diary. I think the key is just to make sure that you're always keeping it in a consistent way. You know, most of the CPAs we talk to say at least every week you should be tracking your hours and the activities that you're doing, ideally every day. You shouldn't be rounding up to like hours. You need to be tracking. I would say most of the CPAs are going to tell you track by minutes, and then make sure that's consistent over the whole year and that you have that so you could produce it if you need it. Now, whether or not travel hours can be included depends completely on your CPA's read of the law.
Yeah. So Kirsten composed an article I recently published on material participation hours for short-term rentals. And so, you know, I write on there very clearly, these are possible hours. But the last paragraph, I say, look, just track all your hours no matter what. And don't just go for the 100 hours, exceed that threshold, right? Don't just go for like 101 hours, right? And be done, right? The idea is that record all your hours. And then if any of those ever get invalidated, then you'll have extra hours doing something else that do get counted, right? And you still meet the 100-hour threshold. I think that's, at the end of the day, that's going to be best practice, I think. But again, we're not CPAs. Talk to your CPA about that.
Yeah. So Asai asked, do you have to track other and record other people's hours?
Yeah.
That is a great question. I actually asked our CPA that as well, and a couple other CPAs. And what I was told is, you know, if the IRS audits you, they're going to look at what's reasonable. And so if you did some major total gut to the studs and you're saying, oh, I did 101 hours and I'm ahead of the contractors, that may be unreasonable to the IRS. But the advice I got from our CPA was you don't need to track the hours as long as it's reasonable that you did more hours than anyone else. And so we self-managed our first year. We did a very small renovation, and we did a lot of hours that we tracked. And we had, you know, it was very clear to us that if we get audited, that, you know, there's not going to be a whole lot of, there's like the cleaners definitely did not do 100 hours. Yeah. The contractors did not do 100 hours. And so there's going to be no question to the IRS that what's reasonable. So I would talk to your CPA and say, hey, CPA, this is what I'm planning on. Do you want me to get the contractors to submit the number of hours that they did? And your CPA may give you a different advice, but this is what our CPA said. As long as it's reasonable that you did more hours than anyone else, we didn't have to worry about asking everyone to submit their hours to us.
Yeah. And let's see, Ushma, any chance for connections in Canada? Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So CPAs, we definitely already have.
A couple agents too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And so what we do is we have a person who finds agents on our team. And so if you say, hey, I'm going to be investing in this area, he can go out and kind of screen some agents and see if he can find you the right fit agent in Canada. Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Okay. Joseph, how are you executing personal mentoring at scale in real time? Is it just Facebook Q&A? Great question. Great question, Joseph. You know, one thing I'll say, Joseph, right? Just like we're doing right now, a lot of you have very similar questions, right? And so that's one way we address it in Q&As like this. But on top of that, that's why we added coaches and mentors, right? Because we wanted to make sure that we provided that level of support. But more importantly, right? It's you know, you want different perspectives, right? You don't want just our perspective. You want people who have been doing this in different markets, right? Different types of properties, right? Like we have a city property, other people will have properties in vacation areas. Some will have maybe a duplex that they converted into a short-term rental in not a vacation area, right? So you want different experiences, different perspectives. And that's really the power of, you know, what we've created is that, and I didn't even mention the community, but the community also is just amazing. Like you'll see how quickly people learn the stuff. And then they in turn will then become really well versed in these things and be very helpful in terms of like answering these questions. And so it's really cool to see. And then when you get into Empire Builders, wow, I mean, it's like a whole nother level. We have a list of all the Empire Builders who own short-term rentals, and I think the list is over 200. And so that's how active that group has been. And so highly experienced group, probably already own a short-term rental in the exact market you're looking at. So probably would know a lot about, you know, cleaners, handyman, all that stuff that you would need. So that's how we do it at a personal level. Okay, MP, can you buy new short-term rentals every year, one at a time? Well, you can buy multiple short-term rentals in a year, and then materially participate in a new short-term rental every year to shelter losses in W-2, yes. And then turn it into passive short-term rental next year, yes. by hiring a property management company. Yeah.
Yes. But I will say that 100% bonus depreciation, this is the last year for that. Next year, it's going to go to 80%, then 60%, 40%, 20%. And so what you'll be able to maximize with your tax losses this year will be somewhat less next year. We still create a lot of losses through renovations and other expenses. So bonus depreciation isn't your only tax benefit, but just know this is the last year of maximizing 100% bonus depreciation.
Yeah. Vernon, any suggestions how you would make your property a destination getaway in a rural town like upstate Maine? Hey, you're from Maine.
Yeah, no, we have a student who has a short-term rental up in, at least a couple in upstate Maine. I think they bought a second one. And some of the things they did were they kind of set up chef stuff and activities to really set themselves apart. So they're in Empire Builders. And so if you go through this course and you end up in Empire Builders, I would definitely, or go to Team Investing Maine. So we forgot to mention that we actually have team investing groups that are Facebook groups that a lot of people are in to kind of share people who have been in Empire Builders to share resources.
Yeah, but you have to be an Empire Builders.
Yeah, you have to be an Empire Builders.
Okay, and then, but the other thing I wanted to mention is that we do cover something called becoming a destinationaire in the course, and the idea is to make the area more of a destination by creating these types of activities or just like collaborating with local farmers or something like that and creating some type of an activity, right? So it's being proactive about making your place a destination. It's not just sitting back and saying, hey, what's out there? You go out and create the destination and make it a destination.
Yeah, and Empire Builders, again, is only open to our students who have taken courses from us. And then once you finish a course, you're given the opportunity to join Empire Builders.
So are your strategies applicable to Canadian physician living in Canada? I think we answered that one.
Yes, we did.
Okay, Asal, so we have to keep a rough record of everyone's hours who presses through the house?
Again, yeah, our CPA said we did not, as long as it was reasonable. I would definitely ask your CPA. You know, what we...
I think Kirsten answered these questions for us.
Awesome.
Okay. Yep. Okay. Jeremy. Oh, realtor. Hey, Jeremy. Are these short-term rentals purchased by loans from a bank? If so, is the goal to pay them off ASAP? Just seems to be so risky to stack up mortgages, even with a lot of cash flow. If the market goes down or if another pandemic event happens and they close down short-term rentals. Yeah, it's a good point, Jeremy. And I think one of the things that we talked about earlier is that risk mitigation framework. And so this definitely will be something that you want to think about and you know, what is possible for, you know, one person may be different for another person, right? So we have, you know, some people who have, you know, income in excess of $1 million, right? Some other people might have incomes of 300,000. These are people in very different scenarios. And the person with $1 million income with a recession-proof neurosurgery job, you know, they're going to be able to support, you know, more mortgages, right?
Or they may choose to, or they may choose to not. I mean,
exactly.
And also, I think it also depends on your portfolio, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you have a portfolio with a lot of long-term rentals like us, you may be willing to take more risk with a single short-term rental or two than somebody who just owns one or two properties, because now they have the concentration risk that if something happens, and if they only own two properties and they're in the same town and a hurricane hits, well, now they have a lot more concentration risk. So you really do want to be thoughtful about your concentration risk and how much leverage you want to take, because some people are using the 10% down second home mortgage and they're doing multiple of those, and some people choose not to do that. So I would say this is really a personal thing, thinking through the risk tolerance that you have and making sure that you're thinking of what happens if there is another lockdown with COVID. How am I going to be able to manage this? Do I want to put aside some reserves? Do I want to make sure I'm putting only 25% down? Do I want to make my buffer for the cash and cash return 30% instead of 20%? And those are the decisions that you really need to think through as an individual based on your situation and decide for yourself, because not everyone is going to choose the same thing.
Yeah. And then the other thing is that, you know, this is an example of those blind spots we're talking about, right? This is a blind spot for a lot of people who aren't in our community, because in our communities we're talking about this type of stuff all the time. But if you're not surrounded by people who are thinking like this, like you are, Jeremy, then they're not gonna be aware of these issues, and they're just going to be blindly going out there and buying short-term rental after short-term rental. The conversations that we're having in our groups, our private groups, is balancing your portfolio, right? And so you're not so heavy in short-term rentals. Right?
And also having backup plans. Again, a lot of people in our community, they're buying multifamily properties that work as long-term rentals, and they're making them short-term rentals right now. And if a downturn comes and they have to turn it into a long-term rental, well, they're still going to cash flow, and that's, now they have options.
Yep. Okay. How long does the course take?
So May 14th is when the Facebook community closes. May 14th, May 13th, something like that. And so you have the support in the Facebook community for that long. You have 5 Q&As, and then the content's available to you as soon as you buy. So you could go through the content in the next week if you wanted to, and then participate in the Q&As. So it's kind of up to you.
Yeah. So 5 weeks of Q&As, right? And then that 5 weeks of the Facebook community being open. So during that time, but you can get through the content a lot quicker. Yeah. Okay. MP. What is the most cost-effective way to set up LLCs if you plan on being involved with real estate investing for a long time? Yeah, I think the unlimited packages are the most cost-effective way.
If you're going to have,
that's what he's saying. Investing for a long time.
Yeah, more than 4 or 5 LLCs. Oftentimes, it pays for itself.
Yeah,
and so that's what we've done, and we've used a lot
in 2 years, like probably, or 2.5 years doing it. I wish I did it from the beginning, but 2.5 years doing it, we've probably formed like 15 LLCs or something like that. So it's been very worth it for us. We've gone past that 4 or 5 really quickly. All right, Jeremy, where do I get more info on the tax sheltering for short-term rentals? For example, what qualifies me doing 100 hours? Yeah, so the 2 articles, one was the material participation article, and then the other one is the tax benefits of short-term rentals. That's another article you can read. Those 2 articles will give you a lot of information.
And we have a podcast, Doctors Building Wealth. And if you listen to the one called Short-Term Rental, Long-Term Plans, that was when we bought that index property, and it talks exactly about what we did.
Yeah. Would you recommend getting permitted for every enhancement for a property, or can we get away with enhancements without submitting for approval, especially if you have nice neighbors and no HOA? Yeah, so we don't.
It's risk mitigation.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to think through the upsides and the downsides.
Yeah, exactly. We don't ever. I shouldn't say we don't ever, but how we like to answer these questions is that you got to think about the upsides and downsides, right? And really comes down to your assessment of those upsides and downsides. And we can tell you what the downsides are, right? Is that if you do unpermitted work, then you could potentially run into problems like
we've done it before, right? And we had a huge delay in our because the inspector happened to come, and so that was a huge delay in that. And then you might have issues when you go to sell it too. So just kind of be aware of that.
Yeah. So again, think through those upsides and downsides. That's that risk mitigation framework. Inga, I was just saying, Inga, that the way that I did it, I DIY'd it for many years. And then I got that the unlimited LLC package, which you can do an unlimited number of LLCs for a fixed price. It's in the 5 figures. It's like over $10,000. But like I said, it pays for itself once you get to like 4 or 5 LLCs. If you're going to be investing for a long time, or if you're very active like we are, it's a no-brainer. At least for me. I'm not saying you should do it. I'm just saying that it's been a no-brainer for us. Lisa, for financing, most investment properties require 25% down payment for a mortgage. Is that true for most short-term rentals? So you can do a 10% down second home loan, but there are some restrictions you need to be aware of. So be sure to talk to your lender about those restrictions for second home loans. But those restrictions are applied for the first 12 months of ownership. And then after that, what our lender tells us is that you can use the property any way you want. And then there are other ways, right? There are, like, if you want to own or occupy a property for a period of time, there are some low interest loans. So that'd be kind of like, it's not really a house hacking. It's like buying a property with a low interest loan and then living in it for a period of time and then renting it out after that time period. But you got to
be thoughtful about your tax savings, because that might make
That's true. That might affect your taxes. Yeah, for sure.
Affect your tax savings.
Yeah. So you got to think about it, but you're not driven by just tax savings.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, Joseph, how have your past students gotten the registration for the course reimbursed for CME with the way CME is being rewarded?
So,
Yeah,
you know,
so
we can't speak to how, whether or not you're going to be able to get it reimbursed.
Yeah.
You can take the receipt and the CME and you can see if you get it reimbursed. But again, we can't speak to whether or not your specific,
yeah,
you know, hospital is going to do
the
that.
the only thing we're going to say is that you can get CME with the course, but we don't, you know, we're not going to say anything about reimbursement. That's up to you and your institution. But if you go to that the website and read, go to the company that sponsors the CME, which is based on reflections, not on the content, then they'll have like a Q&A. You can ask them that question, or there may be a question already where they answer that question. Okay, Jenna, how do you designate a property as a short-term rental? Is there a documentation requirement? So different definitions depending on who you're asking, right? So from a tax perspective, from an IRS perspective, it's defined as an average length of stay of 7 days or less. Okay, and if you exceed that, then it's considered a long-term rental. But in Hawaii, for example, right, a short-term rental is considered anything less than 30 days, and they're actually
state.
Yeah, for the state, and they're talking about changing that to 180 days, right? So just different definitions depending on your perspective and whatever you're trying to achieve.
Yeah. And so what you really want to be aware of is if you're buying in a short-term rental in a certain community, that you understand all the local regulations about what is a short-term rental and all the licenses and all that stuff that you need, all the inspections if you need one. And then also be aware of the IRS stuff so that you can make sure if you want to use the tax loophole that you keep an eye on the average length of stay for the calendar year.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Kirsten. Yeah, for Vanny. Yeah, she was just wondering which vendor we use.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see. Dr. Nita Thepa, OBGYN. We have 4 short-term rentals in Colombia. Nice. I love Colombia. I really do. I want to invest there. Natalie, if you are rehabbing a property and decide to add a pool, is it better to do that the same year you do your cost seg, or can you do it in any year?
Yeah, so what we usually do is the cost segregation before we do any rehab. And the reason is you can actually get some of the money back for things you throw out. And so we always buy the property, do our cost segregation, get our bonus depreciation. Then we do the rehab and the upgrades. And then we take all the list of everything we did to our CPA. And then they kind of apply almost a second cost segregation study to help us write off all those other pieces, either as capitalized, so they're written off over time, or they're expensed, written off as a loss that year. And so we almost do 2 studies in a way. And use bonus depreciation twice, before the rehab and after the rehab.
Ranjit, we are wondering if we should do your short-term rental course or the Zero to Freedom course, I guess. Do you go into more detail in the short-term rental course, or do you cover the same material? I think we answered this. Yeah.
Yeah, totally different material.
Very, very different material. Nita, we want to consolidate the short-term rentals under one name and build a social media marketing and ultimately a brand name. Nice. Like cooperation under our LLC. Can you give us some tips on how we can do that? Love all your content. Obviously we can't give you kind of business advice here, but what I can say is that a lot of people will not. I don't know that I don't see a lot of advantage of putting it all under one LLC. You can create a brand without putting everything under an LLC, right? You can have everything. What our asset protection company recommends is put every property under a separate LLC. So that's, if in this situation, if you have 4 short-term rentals in Colombia, you would have a separate LLC for each, but then a brand can all tie them all together, right? So you would say, you would say short-term rental Rose, short-term rental, Violet, short-term rental, you can kind of, right, you can kind of tie them all together with the naming by creating some type of a logo. And so one of our mentors. I don't know that
I would share the LLC name though in public.
No. You could do it. You could do it. Yeah, you can do a logo that has nothing to do with the LLC name. I'm just saying that you want to kind of, you can brand them so they're all kind of tied together. And in our course, there's a really good example of that. One of the mentors actually has done exactly what you want to do. So they can help you in the course. Okay, Sanjay. So is the depreciation different scale than long-term rental, short-term rental?
No, depreciation is really dependent on how many things that you have in the structure that you can write off. And so when you look at the purchase price of a property, it also what also kind of weighs in is the value of the land, because you can only depreciate the structure. And so I have a great article called How to Estimate Bonus Depreciation, something like that. And so
Kirsten posted it.
Okay,
yeah,
she did.
Yeah, she did earlier, but yeah,
Okay.
she can post it again.
Okay.
And Sanjay also had a question about bonus depreciation. And so Kirsten, there's another article called bonus depreciation and cost segregation. I think you posted the one that Leti was referring to is how to estimate bonus depreciation. So maybe both those articles for Sanjay. Ryan, does the 100-hour requirement become 200? No, it's 100 hours. And, so one spouse can do 50, the other spouse can do 50. How do you tally 5 hours spent by each of you at the same time? So yeah, there is this little thing that you have to check with your CPA about, but if you're both doing the same activity, then some accountants might say that you can't double count those. So that's just something you have to check with your CPA. But if you're doing 5 hours doing different activities, then it'd be a total of 10 hours in that situation. Pavani, how will tax depreciation savings work if 2 friends invest together? Yeah, so both of you cannot do the 100 hours and more than anyone else, because you both can't do more than the other person, right? And so that's one thing. So when those situations occur, then what we have heard CPAs say is that, again, check with your CPA, but one person can do the 100-hour more than anyone else, and then the other person does 500 hours. That's one way you can do it. And so
500 hours across the portfolio. And
you have to have other properties. Yeah, right? The other person would have to buy a bunch of other properties to meet that requirement, probably. All right, Joseph, follow-up initial question. Do you guys try to execute partial asset dispositions? Yeah, so with our portfolio, yeah, I mean, that's something that we have done. Our accountant will handle that. So we've done some major renovations and disposed of stuff. So certainly. Hall McGee, if you have reps already from long-term rentals, we don't yet, but just you wait. Okay, awesome. Cool. Am I right that you still have to treat short-term rentals separately in terms of material participation? Yes. Absolutely. Yeah, I keep the material participation for short-term rentals separate from my material participation for long-term rentals. I count both those hours separately. Okay, Rig, is it possible to get reps from 2 long-term rental properties, a duplex and a quadplex?
We've seen people get it from 2 units total, but they were self-managing and doing it really, really involved. It's just about the hours that you do and the activities and tracking those hours. So, and making sure that you're doing greater than 50% of your working time on the real estate, not, in working another job. So maybe
I have an article called "How Many Units Does It Take to Qualify for Real Estate Professional Status?" So Kirsten, if you can post that article. And then Oakham, what are the 100 hours specifically spent doing? Check out the article on material participation. And I don't see it yet. Let me see.
It's probably up higher.
This is the primer on real estate professional, but yeah. Okay. All right. Sarah, do you use AirDNA to help determine short-term rental potential?
Yes.
Have you found it to be consistently higher than you end up getting? Maybe lower?
Well, one case lower, and one case, I think once we add the pool in, we'll have a better sense.
Yeah,
right?
Sarah, it's just a data point though, right? We were saying you gotta more than triangulate, right? Get multiple inputs to get the, it's really a range ultimately you're going to get, right? High end, a middle, and a conservative, right?
Right. And you can make your property stand out and do so much better than what AirDNA is telling you, or you can do a poor job with your property and get less than what the AirDNA is going to tell you you're going to get from that property, because they're just adding together all the data, and they're not going into the nitty gritty of looking at what kind of finishes, what kind of, state your property's in, what kind of, how you wrote your listing. They're not doing any of that stuff. They're just doing a big overview average. And so I think you can do better or you can do worse. And so that's why we get multiple data points.
Thanks, Kirsten. Those are the articles there. So thanks, Kirsten. We're keeping her busy.
Yeah, we haven't purchased any property in California, but I'd say two of our coaches.
Well, we should read the question, because I don't think everybody can read the question. Have you purchased properties in California? Have any of the other coaches?
2 of the coaches have.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. So yeah. So
Yes.
Yes. Ranjit, further to the previous question, we were wondering if you have a network of community in California. Yes, for sure. Yeah. So any of those markets where you might imagine a vacation rental, I mean, no. So yeah, I guess depends on where exactly you're talking about, but a lot of the vacation rental areas, yes. And so.
And we can always find agents.
Exactly.
That's the other thing.
Yep, for sure. Okay, not sure if this is answered already, but just to make sure, can we get any U.S. tax benefit from international short-term rentals?
That's a great question. I asked our CPAs that as well, because we want to buy a short-term rental in Italy, and they told me I could depreciate it over 40 years is what I was told. Yeah. We do have CPAs who have some international experience, and so you can also be connected to them.
But you're not getting the bonus depreciation,
right?
Just depreciating over 40 years.
Depreciation
straight line over 40. Yeah,
that was what that CPA told me.
Yeah, so. Victoria, if you cash out refi from your first short-term rental and purchase a new one, how do you factor that new expense into your portfolio?
So what we kind of do when we do cash out refis is when you do a cash out refi from the first property, it's likely that the cash and cash return is going to go, well, not the cash and cash, the cash flow is going to decrease because now you have a bigger loan on it. And so you're probably going to be making less cash flow, but then you go and you purchase another property that has a lot of cash flow. And so you're reusing the same money. So it's really additive, the amount of cash flow you made from your first property and the amount of cash flow that you're making from the second property if you're just reusing that same money.
Okay, and we just talked to a lot of CPAs. And so we work with so many different ones because our community works with a lot of different CPAs. And
because different CPAs have different reads of the law, we like to hear a lot of different perspectives and arguments for why one CPA is reading it versus another reading it totally differently.
Tamar, this may be a silly question. No, there are no silly questions. How much cash do you need to have on hand in order to start this process?
Yeah, I mean, it's helpful to have cash, especially if you're going to put down 25% down on some of the properties. But, you know, we do have students putting 10% down on properties. And then we also have students who are doing some really unique things with commercial lenders and putting down less. So, or doing house hacking, which is 3.5% down.
Or seller financing or partnering, right? There's a lot of ways, right? So, you know, I think that tomorrow, it's like, remember I was saying, like, you don't know what's possible until you see what other people are doing, right? And that's like the value of the community is there's so many cool things that people are doing. And once you start seeing, you're like, wait a second, oh, I can do that too, right? And so I think that's the key is that you gotta, you know, by expanding your network, you expand what you realize is possible, right? And so I think that's one of the values of joining, you know, one of our communities.
So maybe two more questions. And then what you can do is feel free to ask some of the questions in semi-retired physicians. If there are remaining questions that we didn't get to that you feel like you would like answered. And we're in semi-retired physicians fairly regularly.
Yeah, but they may not all be in semi-retired physicians though.
Can you put the link, Kirsten, to semi-retired physicians and semi-retired professionals,
okay.
And they can get into those communities and they can ask the questions there.
That's true. You can add. Those are free communities, and you can join and ask us questions and just tag us, and we'll answer them.
And for those of you who purchase the property, purchase the course, make sure that you jump into the course Facebook community and ask questions in there because we're already in there. Our coaches are already in there answering questions.
Yeah. If you purchase the course, don't ask the question in the public community. Make sure you know that you're in Accelerating Wealth. That's the Facebook community. I think it's labeled Spring of 2022. So make sure you're in that community if you've bought the course. Okay, Joseph, how much are you paying for short-term rental property management versus long-term rental? 20 versus 10?
It's usually 20 to 30%. Yep. If you get a co-host, it might be a little bit cheaper.
15% maybe.
Maybe, yep. But yeah, oftentimes it's over 20% and sometimes up to 30%.
Yeah, that's why a lot of people in our community are self-managing and they're learning how to self-manage, which is, you know, what we teach in the course for sure. Mateo, how do you prove that you have made more hours than anyone else? Do I have to count the hours of everybody else? So yeah, we answered that. Sure. Okay. Jenna, can you rent your short-term rental to only one person every 2 weeks for 3 days at a time?
If you want to. But if you're staying in it and that's why you're renting it so little, then you're not really, I think your CPA is, well, first of all, it's going to definitely affect your tax losses, but then your CPA may also say, well, this isn't really an intent to make money from a investment property. And so this is really a primary residence, and you can't be claiming the investment tax benefits with a property that you're using pretty much all yourself.
Yeah.
Now, if you have a primary residence, you can rent it out for up to 2 weeks a year and not pay taxes on that with a primary residence exclusion. But I think your CPA would.
I think she's talking about the end of the year too, right?
Oh,
no?
Maybe.
Yeah, one person every 2 weeks for 3 days at a time. No, maybe not. I'm not sure what she's talking about exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Sorry. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Sorry we didn't get to the last 17 questions, but we did answer 71. That's pretty good. All right.
Awesome. Okay.
Okay, good. All right. So yeah, like I said, tag us in those public groups. And thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate it. And we appreciate everybody who signed up. And even if you didn't sign up, we wish you the best. And we're here to help. So yeah, tag us in the public communities, and we'll see how we can help you. All right,
Okay.
great.
Have a nice evening, everybody.
Yeah, take care.